What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Patrick, aka Addicted to Combat, back for another week of UFC action. We've got UFC Vegas 79 on deck this weekend at the Apex. We've got two lightweights squaring off. The number 6 and number 7th ranked guys. The kickboxer, Muay Thai champion, and Rafael Fiziev. He takes on the submission wrestler and former KSW champion, the Polish Mateusz Gamrot. So, very fun matchup there for potentially 5 rounds of action. And we do have an awesome co-main event as well. Kind of a similar grappler versus striker matchup, if you want to put it simply, between Bryce Mitchell and Dan Eay. So, pretty high-level stuff in the main and co-main. The rest of the fight card, I mean, some of it is guys that really do need a win. Fighters coming off of loss streaks and things like that. So, it was kind of a grind to scrape through these fights and try to find an edge on the sports books. I didn't really have many hot takes this week, but I do have 3 money lines. I've got a handful of props as well and some recommended ones as usual. So hit the like, hit the subscribe. We'll jump into these ones. It's been an awesome summer of fights. 17 consecutive weeks of UFC action, and we finally have one break week next week, and then we hop right back into the Apex action. So let's dive into the first money line of the night. So the first money line I have is on Dan Aretta on the prelims. He's a bantamweight fighter. I'm taking him to defeat Miles Johns, and this is a 1-unit wager at -171 on his money line, which I took on BetOnline tonight. Dan Aretta is making his 4th walk to the UFC octagon. He's pretty new in terms of UFC experience compared to Miles Johns, but he's a D2 collegiate wrestler, very strong in the wrestling game, and that's really what he brings to the table here. He's a forward pressure, constant aggression, and he's going to be looking to level change whenever given the opportunity to. His striking is not that great compared to Miles Johns, who I would consider to be the better striker and better boxer in this matchup. But Miles Johns is very low output. His cardio is not all that great either. And although his takedown defense on paper is very good, it's not been tested that much against high-level competition at the UFC level. So I expect Dan Aretta to push the pressure early, force Miles Johns on his back foot, get him against the cage and get his hands locked behind his waist, dump him on his head and start looking for submission attempts and ground and pound, which is what we've come to realize Dan Aretta is very strong at. So coming off of that fight against Ronnie Lawrence, who's a very good MMA wrestler in his own right, Dan Aretta really ragdolled Ronnie Lawrence around the octagon in round 1 and almost got a mounted guillotine victory pretty early, but the referee stepped in too soon. That was deemed a no contest since Ronnie Lawrence didn't officially tap there. So I'm taking the 1-unit stab. Not a whole lot invested on this one because Dan Aretta is still the less experienced guy at the UFC level. So I will be looking later on in this video to attack Aretta and his victory here from a props perspective. But for now, I'm taking the 1-unit stab at -171. Moving up a weight class to featherweight and moving all the way to the co-main event of the fight card for the next one, I do have a moneyline bet on Bryce Mitchell, another wrestler, to defeat Dan Eay here. I've got a -185 moneyline bet for 2 units investment here to win just over 1 in return. And it comes down to just the simple fact that even though Dan Eay is the more experienced UFC fighter, he is the more well-rounded guy with a BJJ background, very good striking potential here to end the fight with his hands. I just think that Bryce Mitchell is going to make that not really matter that much, right? He's got a chain wrestling game plan. He never takes more than 1 minute of a round's time before he's trying to get his hands on his opponent and take them to the mat. When he even attempts the takedowns and level changes, he's tying up the wrists, tying up the legs very well. Looks like a Dagestani out there with the way he controls people and doesn't let them back up. Very physical and very strong top pressure from Bryce Mitchell, who throws ground and pound, and his striking is improving. So another aspect here is we're getting the younger man in Bryce Mitchell, who I still think has some ability to improve his striking as a wrestler versus a guy in Dan Eay who's a slightly older man, and you usually don't see the rapid improvements in the grappling from these strong strikers. So I'm going to take Bryce Mitchell to look a little bit better in his return after he got humbled at the end of last year by Ilya Topuria in that submission loss. So Bryce Mitchell, I expect either a submission or a decision from him. Moving up a weight class again to lightweight and moving all the way to the main event of the evening, I do have a moneyline bet on Rafael Fiziev, 2.5 units at -136 on BetOnline. The line is coming back down. It kind of ballooned up to about -170 for Fiziev as the favorite. It's come back down to around -150 on BetOnline. So I like that price tag quite a bit. A striker versus grappler matchup. We've got the Muay Thai world champion of Rafael Fiziev. He takes on the submission wrestler in Mateusz Gamrot, former KSW champion, a very talented Polish grappler here who's managed to take down all of his opponents in the UFC so far, but we've seen him knocked down in his last 3 performances straight, and I think it will be the impact of the strikes of Rafael Fiziev that's going to be the difference here. You know, whether Rafael Fiziev gets the job done by knockout inside the distance or this gets dragged out in some sort of really competitive 5-round contest, I think the judges are going to score the impact and the damage scored by Rafael Fiziev with those body strikes. He switches stances very well. He's got good distance weapons, like I mentioned, the kicks and long punches, but even up close in the clinch, very good knees up close. That could be a counter to the takedown attempts of Mateusz Gamrot and those vicious hooks that he bobs and weaves, slips and rips with. We saw that against Justin Gaethje in his last fight, which he did lose by a very close competitive decision, but I don't see Mateusz Gamrot absorbing those same strikes that the next level tough Justin Gaethje was able to walk through. So we did see a very good test in a 5-round contest last year where Rafael Fiziev was able to stop Rafael dos Anjos in round 5. So that showed his cardio does look a lot better these days. His pacing looks a lot better. And yeah, I really do think that even over a 5-round contest, we could see the hand raised from Rafael Fiziev. So like I said, 2.5 units on Fiziev at minus 136. Moving on to the props, my first one is on Marina Rodriguez to defeat Michelle Waterson-Gomez in this rematch at strawweight. It's a 3-round bout this time. Before, back in 2021, these two women squared off in a headlined main event for 5 rounds of action where Marina Rodriguez beat Michelle Waterson at flyweight in that bout. And I still think this matchup pretty much plays out the same way in a 3-round fashion at a lighter weight class here. I still think Marina Rodriguez wins by decision, which is the prop I took at minus 150. Just 1 unit investment on that. Now, I still have to admit, I see some value technically on the line of Marina Rodriguez at minus 300 here. I think she wins actually even more of the time than that would imply, right? That implies 75% of the time. I'd say she wins this fight maybe 80-85% of the time, to be honest. Much better striker, much more diverse set of Muay Thai weapons here. And as long as she can stay on her feet in this fight, she should be good to win with higher output, better strikes, better power, and better technique. Now, Michelle Waterson-Gomez seems a lot older on paper. She's got a longer career with more fight miles, but she's only about 1 year older than Marina Rodriguez. Now, Michelle Waterson, not averaging the most takedowns, maybe like 1 per fight at this rate, but it took her all the way until round 4 of their 5-round bout to even get a takedown and get control time, which is the only round that she won. So as long as Marina Rodriguez stays on her feet for the majority of 3 rounds here, I think she does enough damage on the feet to win the favor of the judges and win this by decision. She's not the most dangerous finisher at the UFC level, and likewise, Michelle Waterson has only been finished 1 time by strikes back in like 2008 or 9. You know, it was a corner stoppage. So she's next level tough. Marina Rodriguez at strawweight, not the most potent finisher. I think we see a decision here. So 1 unit at minus 150. The next 3 props are all tied to the same fight that we spoke about earlier in this video. We spoke about Dan Eay winning over Miles Johns. I think he does so by submission. I took a 1/4 unit on Dan Eay's submission prop at plus 400. That is on BetOnline and DraftKings. And I also took on DraftKings, which exists right now. The round 2 submission prop for Dan Eay is plus 1,600, and the plus 2,000 on the round 3 submission prop I find pretty crazy as well, right? Because Miles Johns slows down. I think one of the strengths in this fight, not only the wrestling and grappling of Dan Eay, but also his cardio. So if he can extend this fight and get this finish in round 2 or round 3 when John slows down, we could be handsomely rewarded. I put just 0.1 units on both of those round props, but I do have that 1/4 unit on his submission prop. So 0.25 units at plus 400 for Aretta submission, 0.1 units on each the round 2, round 3 submissions at plus 1,600 and plus 2,000 respectively. As far as some miscellaneous props I like on this card, but I haven't bet myself, using that same logic I used in the Marina Rodriguez bout against Michelle Waterson, her winning by decision, you could soften up that money line of Mizuki Inoue to defeat Hannah Goldie. Instead of paying minus 310 on Mizuki Inoue, you could take her by decision at minus 130 over Hannah Goldie. And I think there's a big skill gap here. Mizuki Inoue is the much more refined striker, much better on the mat. more experience as a professional, just a better athlete all around. But you've got to expect that she might be a little bit tentative coming back in here, not really pushing the pace too hard, coming off of a 3-year-long layoff due to her ACL repair and rehab. So as long as she comes back in here at 29 years old, a ton of experience and confidence, and doesn't look like she's missed a step, she could very well look like a minus 310 money line. But taking her by decision, she's not the most powerful finisher with the strikes. Hannah Goldie physically strong. And I think we do see a tentative Inoue coming back with maybe a little bit of ring rust on her. So taking her to win by decision, if you want to sweat out a long hiatus here, minus 130 for that. I do like Bryce Mitchell at plus 500 on DraftKings to win by submission over Dan Eay. Now, the reason you're getting such a big plus number on Bryce Mitchell is because Dan Eay has never been finished inside the distance before. But you got to admit that this line seems like there's a little bit of value on it, where if you expect Bryce Mitchell, like I do, to go for the takedowns, rack up a lot of control time in this matchup, he's going to find himself in some advantageous positions to look for the submission, find the neck of Dan Eay, and get the submission here. So if he spends a lot of time in this fight in control time positions, for that submission prop to be dangled out there at plus 500, I think that might be worth a poke if you're feeling lucky this week on Bryce Mitchell. And last but not least, I like the Charles Jourdain round 2, round 3 props. This guy kind of starts slow in some bouts. You could see Ricardo Ramos come in here and employ a wrestling game plan early in the fight, but Charles Jourdain comes in round 2 and round 3 like a man possessed, especially in round 3. He's got a lot of late finishes in his career, and for Charles Jourdain to win in round 2, plus 750, for him to win in round 3 is plus 1100 on DraftKings. So I like those props if you do like the Jourdain side this week like I do. I think he does ramp up and look better as this fight goes. Now, one more thing to talk about here, and it's kind of awkward to bring up, but if you watch my full card breakdown, which I did live with Tyler from 138 MMA, I didn't pick a single underdog to win on this card. I picked all 11 favorites to come through, which I know is very unlikely mathematically and statistically here. So if you're looking at some underdogs that I do have a little bit of faith that could come through here, Montserrat Rendon in the very first fight of the night at women's bantamweight, I think that even as a debuting fighter, especially where her money line is at against Tamiris Vidal, who I don't think is very good, I think Rendon could come through with just some very basic striking output and cardio, and she could best Vidal if she slows down. So I think that's a live dog there in the first fight of the night. Not something I want to put my money behind, obviously, but I think she could come through as a dog. Moving up to welterweight, I could see Tim Means coming through if he could survive the flurry in round 1 or the under 1.5 round mark of the dangerous knockout artist, 10 years younger at 29 years old, Andre Fiallo. So I expect personally to see Andre Fiallo probably put a nail in the coffin of Tim Means' career and knock him out early, or at least inflict a lot of damage. But Fiallo has been shown that, I think 13 out of his 15 wins have come under the 1.5 round mark. I think 12 of those 13 knockouts have been all in round 1 for Andre Fiallo. So if Tim Means gets out of that danger zone, he could use his clinch weapons, he could use his wrestling, and he could use his superior cardio and veteran savvy to win this fight as an underdog there at welterweight. AJ Fletcher at the same weight class at welterweight, I think he could come through, either have that early finishing potential he showed that he almost got against Angelusa, or he could just out-wrestle his way to victory, winning probably rounds 1 and rounds 2 over Brian Battle. I could see AJ Fletcher as a live underdog there. Ultimately, I'm picking the better cardio fighter here in Brian Battle, the guy with better output over 3 rounds, but AJ Fletcher, he's got potential. I think he's got more in his abilities than what he's shown so far in the UFC. That's a live dog there, in my opinion. And Ricardo Ramos at featherweight to defeat Charles Jourdain. I think it could happen. You've got the more well-rounded fighter at plus money in Ricardo Ramos, a guy with a BJJ black belt just like Jourdain, but a guy who actually uses his takedown offense in his wrestling to get the fight down to the mat. I could see Ricardo Ramos being dangerous in all areas of this fight, especially early. So these are 4 fighters: Rendon, Tim Means, AJ Fletcher, Ricardo Ramos. I'm picking against them this week. I'm picking all favorites like a square, but I got to admit, these 4 guys and girls I think could come through with the upset this week. Okay, there you have it, you guys. That's all of my betting action for UFC Vegas 79, Fiziev versus Gamrot. Some recommended plays and some underdogs to consider at the very end. And hit the like, hit the subscribe. Let's keep the channel growing. This does wrap up 17 weeks, a whole summer long of nonstop back-to-back-to-back UFC action. We finally get 1 week off next week, and then we're right back at it to close the year off strong. So Let's keep the channel growing. It's already grown quite a bit in the past 17 weeks of consecutive action here. So over 1,300 of you guys subscribe to the channel. I appreciate all of you guys that I've made friends with on Twitter, in the DMs, in the comment sections down below on the videos, and even in those weekly live streams that I love to do so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I continue to look forward to doing it every week. I mean, this has been an obsession of mine since I was a little kid. I mean, I went to my first cage match my mom took me to when I was in first grade, so I'm still obsessed with it to this day. I've got a lot of obsessed fight fans and subscribers to talk fights with. I feel really privileged to do that, so thank you guys. And let's keep the channel growing and keep on making money together. So good luck on all of your betting action this weekend. I'll talk to you guys next time. Cheers.